Well, the time has finally come. My garage is just about complete and getting filled with all kinds of stuff. Underneath this tarp lies my 91 S-10 project, powered by a 472 Cadillac. And we are getting this thing completely uncovered and pulled out to get put into this garage because it's been sitting for an entire year and I still haven't done any work to it other than I bought a bunch of parts for it. I have a new radiator, air compressors for the suspension, the sheet metal to start finishing the body, and we need to make this thing work. I heard it start before I put it into the car trailer when I sold my building a year ago, and I haven't touched it since. So we're gonna get it pulled out of here. The S-10 is in the garage, finally. What we got here is a whole lot of work to do. It's somewhat of a complete vehicle as far as it has an engine, a transmission, the differentials in it. The air suspension is, well, obviously you can see that's a block of wood that I use to hold up the rear because the air suspension is not all installed. There's one of the airbags in the floor here. I do have the parts to do it. I just didn't have the time, and I didn't have the room, I should say. Without my new garage, I had no room to keep this vehicle in this garage, which is why it was stuffed underneath that tarp. I actually have brand new sheet metal up against the wall that I bought almost a year ago when this truck first got into this garage. When I sold my building, I thought I was going to work on this last winter, and instead I ended up working on the Firebird for a lot longer than I'd planned. Anyway, we have a 472 Cadillac engine, which the hood does not have hinges on it yet. I'm going to take that off. We have some major oxidation on the aluminum parts, which is not very good. Dang. This was all clean and shiny. A polished aluminum intake. Putting a car underneath the tarp for a year was not smart. Well, anyway, here it is. At least I put a rag inside the carburetor to keep any dirt from getting in there, which kind of appears it worked somewhat. Since there's bugs and there's little shells. Ooh, there's mice in here. There's little nuts and seeds that are cracked open. All stuffed down inside my cylinder head. And what would have been inside my carburetor, I think, if I wouldn't have had it shut. I'm probably going to have to spend some time cleaning up the aluminum parts that oxidized very heavily. But my first plan is to get radiator hoses for the upper and lower. And I have to figure out a cooling fan. And I still have to wire in this extra transmission cooler. I got the lines made there, so it's just rubber hose. All right, well, getting the hood off of it, finding the corrosion was not too exciting for me. But let me kind of go over and tell you a little bit about what this actually is. This is a 91 Chevy S-10 that started life as a 4-cylinder. I've had for probably 20 years with the intention of doing something with it. It never started off with the 472 Cadillac idea until my buddy's 69 Cadillac got wrecked. And I ended up having the opportunity to purchase that. I kept the motor and transmission from it and the whole drivetrain, basically. I got rid of the rear end years ago. So the rear end that I decided to go with behind the 472 Cadillac, I put a 14-bolt rear end from a motorhome that actually has a little bit narrower wheelbase than the truck. And I had thought that I could run just the inside dual underneath the fender of the S-10. And it kind of would have worked, but it also seemed like it was going to be way too tight to actually fit in there. So what I did instead was I made a frame to wheel tub the dually. And now I'll have the ability to run a single wheel or dual rear wheels with a 14-bolt full floating rear end. So I should have no problem with the drivetrain handling the power coming out of this Cadillac engine. The transmission's actually the Pontiac transmission that came out of my Firebird when I put the LS motor in. I put a 5.3 in, so I needed a Chevy transmission. So the transmission that I used was also from the motorhome that I took the rear end from. So it has a 4-link suspension in the rear with a triple bellows airbag. So I'll have a ton of lift in the rear and I'll be able to have a lot of adjustment. The front is a double bellows bag that actually has the front suspension from an F-body Firebird from 1982. I took the strut towers and the struts and spindles and I used that to create the engine compartment wide enough to fit the engine in there. Did I have to do that? Probably not. Was it a good idea? Probably not also, but it is currently what I'm working with. Whether or not that's going to work, I don't know. The truck itself has been shortened to the point where the original box side had became the actual cab side. So I'd moved the box forward that far. I think it was even further than that. I might have taken out, I can't remember the exact dimensions, it was so long ago. But basically I slid the box side over top of the cab to make up the side. And now that I've cut this into it, my new plan is to take this sheet metal and come up against here and bend it in to make about where the taillight is, or maybe go all the way to the edge with a flat panel with a little bit of concave in it. Same thing in the front. We're going to come from here. We're going to run from here to here, and I'm going to put a little bow in it to make it a little bit more rigid, and then I'll put a cap that'll cover it up. And I have no idea what it's going to look like, but that's kind of in my head what I think I want to do to make up for having these things sticking way out. I could obviously run a piece of metal just like that and cover it up like that, but I feel like that's not the correct way to do it. I may fender flare out the front. Also, it is a very wide, very short truck. In the car it came out of was a 69 Cadillac Fleetwood that weighed 5,200 pounds, I believe, on the scales at Earlville. And with the rear end gear that it had, it would run a, 14.8 was its best time, 14.9. Low 15 seconds in the quarter mile. And it would never get into third gear. He was always still stuck in second gear because of the rear end gearing. So this engine made a lot of torque. My guess is it's somewhere over 600 foot-pounds if it was actually put on a dyno. And for a truck this small and light, which as far as light goes, the floors are aluminum, it's a roll cage and square tubing. It's going to be heavy in the department of the engine is pretty heavy, and that 14-bolt rear end in the back is also an absolute tank. I'm going to compensate for the weight of the engine by putting most of my weight in the rear. This is a 20-gallon fuel cell that mounts directly behind the rear axle. I'm using an old propane tank that I've modified here with a drain on the bottom of it as a air compressor or an air tank. I have 2 air compressors that are going to get mounted in the back right here. And then I also have the mounts made up for dual batteries in this corner. So the air tank goes over there, batteries go over here. This thing should be one wild truck, and I can't wait to start working on it. And well, that time is now. I'm gonna see what I can get done here. First thing I'm gonna have to do is clean up, see what I can do about getting this mess all out of here. I don't know. That's unfortunate. I was not expecting to see that at all. This should be one fun truck by next year, and I'm super excited to see it actually run and drive.